Good afternoon. I am now going to provide a detailed elaboration of each step in the theistic proof. Premise 1. Something exists. It is undeniable that something exists. No one can deny his own existence without affirming it. One must exist in order to deny that he exists, which is self-defeating. But whatever is undeniable is true, and what is unaffirmable is false. Hence it is undeniably true that I exist. It should be noted here that this argument is not claiming that one's own existence is rationally inescapable. It is logically possible that I do not exist, but since I do exist, it is actually undeniable that I do exist. So, while my existence may be contingent, in other words, it may be possible that I not exist, nevertheless, while I do exist, it is actually undeniable that I do exist. Hence, so long as someone exists, he may begin the process of moving from the premise that something exists to the conclusion that something necessarily exists, and that would be God. Premise 2. My non-existence is possible. Something undeniably exists. This existence must fit one of three logical categories: impossible, possible, or necessary. And reality is subject to the law of non-contradiction. Reality cannot be contradictory. We will argue that since my existence is neither impossible nor necessary, it follows that it must be possible for me not to exist. First, my existence is not impossible. I do exist, and undeniably so. But what exists proves that its existence is actually possible. Only impossible things, like square circles, cannot exist. My actuality proves that it is possible for me to exist. Hence, my existence is not impossible. Further, my existence is not necessary. A necessary existence is one that cannot not exist. The non-existence of a necessary being is impossible. If there is a necessary being, then it must exist necessarily. There is no other way a necessary being could exist than to exist necessarily. What is more, a necessary existence would be pure actuality with no potentiality whatsoever. If it had any potentiality with regard to its existence, then it would be possible for it not to exist. But this is precisely what a necessary existence cannot do. It is not possible for a necessary existence not to exist. Therefore, a necessary existence would be pure actuality with no potentiality in its being whatsoever. Secondly, also a necessary existence would be changeless. Whatever changes must have the possibility for change. If change were impossible, then it could not change. But a necessary being has no possibility whatsoever. And thirdly, a necessary existence would have to be a non-temporal and non-spatial existence. If space and time involve change of position and moment, then a necessary existence could not be either spatial or temporal in its being. Its being cannot change, and both space and time involve change. Fourth, a necessary existence would have to be eternal. If it ever did not exist, then it would be a possible existence, but it has no possibility at all with regard to non-existence. Whatever comes to be is not a necessary existence, for whatever comes to be moves from a state of potentiality to a state of actuality with regard to existence. And the necessary being has no potentiality in its being whatsoever. Likewise, for the same reason, a necessary being could not ever cease to be. It has no possibility for non-existence either. Fifth, there can be only one necessary existence. What is pure actuality must be one, since there is no way for one thing to differ from another in its being unless there is some real potentiality for differentiation. But in a being of pure actuality, there is no potential whatsoever. Hence, there is no real differentiation in it. All of it is one. There cannot be two or more, since neither would really be different from the other in its being. Sixth, a necessary existence would have to be simple and undivided. It could not be composed of different parts or elements. There is no principle of differentiation within it. All is simply one. Further, whatever is composed could be decomposed or destroyed, but it is impossible to destroy the existence of a necessary being. If it exists at all, then it must be and cannot not be. Hence, a necessary existence must be simple and undivided. Seventh, a necessary existence would have to be infinite in whatever attributes it possesses. If it is knowing, then it must be all-knowing. If powerful, then it must be all-powerful. If good, it must be all good. And the reason for this is simple enough. Only what has potentiality can be limited. Limitation means that which differentiates the sphere of one thing from another. Pure actuality is being, pure and simple. Everything else only has being in one form or another depending on its limiting potential. Pure actuality would be unlimited by any potential in and of itself. The only limitations on pure actuality are those of possibility outside it. Even pure actuality could not know or perform the impossible. Eighth, and finally, a necessary being must be an uncaused being. Whatever is caused passes from potentiality to actuality, for that is what causality means. But a necessary being has no potentiality, and it cannot change. Therefore, it is clear that a necessary being cannot be caused. And since a self-caused being is impossible, it must be concluded that a necessary being is an uncaused being. Now, from the above description of what a necessary existence would be, if there were one, it is both obvious and undeniable that I am not that kind of an existence. My existence is not necessary. First, I am a changing being. I change in space, time, and knowledge. I do not always live the same moment nor in the same place or relation to the world. This is an obvious fact of my experience. Further, it is an undeniable fact of experience that I change in knowledge. Even if I claim to have come to the realization that my knowledge is unchanging, I have not avoided changing in my knowledge. For anyone who comes to realize or know something has in fact changed in his knowledge. There was the state of realization before he believed, which was followed by the different state in which he came to believe that he is unchanging in knowledge. Hence, it is really impossible to come to know that one has unchanging knowledge. If there is anyone with unchanging knowledge, he would have always known it. But if I change in any way, then I am not a necessary being, because a necessary being is both simple and unchanging. As simple, it has no parts, and hence cannot be partly anything. Whatever it is wholly and completely. In addition, an unchanging being could not know anything in a changing way. Things could change, but its knowledge of them could not. All it knows, it would have to know always. It follows, therefore, that I am not a necessary existence, for I know in a changing way, and a necessary existence could not possibly know in a changing way. Second, I am not alone. I use language, but no language is entirely private. Language is a medium of communication shared with others. For more on this, see Ludwig Wittgenstein's Philosophical Investigations. By language, I speak to others. I cannot deny that I use language without using it, and I cannot deny that I use it to speak to others without speaking something to others. Not all language is emotive self-muttering. Even atheists publish books expecting others to read them. Whenever I use language with others, I use it to speak to them. When I make utterances strictly by myself, I mean nothing for others. I am simply emoting and mean nothing by it. But it is impossible to deny that I mean something by language without uttering a meaningful statement, which is thereby self-defeating. All who deny there is another for whom their statement is meant either make no meaningful statement or else really have another in mind for whom that statement is meant. In short, both the fact and use of language imply others. Without others, there would be no language and no meaningful statement would ever have been made. But it is undeniable that some meaningful statement has been made. Otherwise, that very statement would be meaningless. Hence, it follows that I am not alone. Others are necessarily implied in my use of language. But more than one being cannot be necessary. There can only be one necessary being, as was shown above. Wherever there is a multiplicity of beings, they must be limited. There cannot be many infinite beings. But where there is a limited being, there must be a limiting potential. Hence, I, as a limited being, among others, have both actuality, because I am, and limiting potentiality, because I am not infinite. This means that I cannot be a necessary being. A necessary being has no limiting potential, as has already been stated. Therefore, both change and multiplicity in what exists show that what I am is not a necessary being. We are now in a position to put the argument together. I exist. This cannot be denied. My existence cannot be impossible since I actually exist, nor can my existence be necessary since my existence implies both change and multiplicity, neither of which a necessary being can have. The only remaining alternative is that my existence must be a possible existence. That is, I am, but I might not be. My non-existence is actually possible. I can come to be, and I can cease to be. I am a may be, but not a must be. Although I exist, nevertheless, I have the potentiality within my very being not to exist. I could go out of existence at any moment. I am contingent, as well as limited and changing. Premise 3. Whatever has the possibility for non-existence is currently caused to exist by another. Whatever has the possibility of non-existence must be caused to exist by another because potentiality is not actuality. What is but could possibly not be is only a potential existence. It has existence, but it also has the possibility of non-existence. Now, the very existence of this potential existent is either self-caused, caused by another, or uncaused. There are no other possibilities. But it cannot be self-caused, since that's impossible. Neither can it be uncaused, for if it were uncaused, then mere possibility would be the ground of actuality. But nothing cannot produce something. It must be concluded, then, that whatever has the possibility for non-existence must be caused to exist by another. Let us now elaborate the argument. First of all, by causality we mean the actualization of a potential. A cause, then, is that which affects a transition from potentiality to actuality. Further, no being, whether contingent or necessary, can be self-caused. A self-caused being would have to be ontologically prior to itself. It would have to be simultaneously in a state of actuality and potentiality with regard to being, which is impossible. Potentiality is not actuality. Nothing is not something. A cause of being must exist in order to cause. And what is to be caused must not exist, or else its existence does not need to be caused. Hence, in order to cause one's own existence, one must simultaneously exist and not exist, which is impossible. Furthermore, a being that could possibly not exist cannot be uncaused. Its being is only possible and not necessary. It is not a must be, but only a may be, which is. But the possible is not the actual. Mere possibility does not account for actuality. The impossible cannot be, the possible can be, and the necessary must be. The impossible can never come to be, the necessary can never come to be or cease to be, but the possible can come to be and cease to be. But whatever can come to be must be caused to be, for something cannot come from nothing. The mere potential for being cannot actualize itself. If it is an actualized potentiality, then it either actualized itself, or it was actualized by something outside of itself. But no being can actualize its own existence. The actualization of a potentiality is what is meant by causality. Hence, to actualize one's own potential for being would mean to cause one's own being, which is impossible. However, since the existence of possible beings has actualized, it follows that there is a cause of existence outside them which actualizes their existence. In short, the actual does not come from the potential unless something outside it actualizes its potential. No potential can actualize itself. The potential for being does not account for the existence of something. Many things which could possibly exist do not exist, for example, centaurs, mermaids, and Pegasus. Why then do other things which might not exist actually exist? The only adequate explanation for why there is something rather than nothing at all is that the something that could be nothing is caused to exist by something that cannot be nothing. In brief, all contingent beings are caused by a necessary being. Whatever is but might not be is dependent on what is but cannot not be. Another way to see the need for a cause of all possible beings is to analyze the very nature or kind of existence it has. If there were a necessary being, it would be pure actuality with no potentiality in its being whatsoever. Impossible beings have neither actuality nor potentiality. They are not and cannot be. But possible beings have both potentiality and actuality in their very being. They consist of co-principles of being. In Latin, their ens, or being, is composed of esse, or active existence, and essentia, essence. But whatever is composed of esse and essence must be caused to exist by another. Esse cannot cause itself, and essence cannot cause esse. What something is does not explain the fact that it is, unless it is a necessary being whose very essence is to exist. But it is not of the essence of a possible being, such as I am, to exist. But it is of my essence that I might not exist, even though I do indeed exist. Hence, since it is not of my essence to exist, and since it is only of the essence of a necessary being to exist, then it follows that we must seek for the ground or cause of every possible being, such as I am. There is perhaps an even easier way to see the need for a cause of every contingent or possible being. An infinite and unchanging being must be uncaused, but there can only be one such being, as was shown earlier. Therefore, every other being must be caused by another, since to be self-caused is impossible. Since I am not a necessary being, it must be concluded that I, and every other contingent being that exists, must be caused to exist by a cause beyond me, or beyond us. Before leaving this point, it should be stressed that all causality of existence is current. What is called for is not a cause for my becoming, but for my continued being. The argument rests on conserving causality, not originating causality. The reason for this is very simple. I am right now a contingent being. It is not that I once was contingent when I came to be, but now I'm not. Whatever was once contingent will always be contingent, for whatever can come to be is not a necessary being. A necessary being cannot come to be. It must ever be and may never not be. This means that whenever I am contingent, and however long I remain contingent, I will always need a cause of my existence. In fact, it is misleading to speak of existence as though it were something one could get all at once and a package to keep for the rest of his life. What we have is not really existence, but a continual moment-by-moment process of existing. We do not have being, but continuous being. What causes me to be when I need not be or continue to be? That is the question, and this is the real metaphysical question that only theism can answer adequately. All causality of existing or being is simultaneous and current. The cause of becoming may be before the effect, but the cause of being must be concurrent with the effect. The cause of my here and now existence must be vertical and not linear. The artist is the cause of the becoming of the painting, but not of its continued being. The artist dies, but the painting continues to be. Likewise, the parents are the cause of the coming to be of the child, but something else must be the cause of the child's continuing to be, since he continues to exist without the parents. This brings us to premise 4. There cannot be an infinite regress of current causes of existence. Before I elaborate on this premise, let us back up a bit and cover the premises that have already been mentioned. Premise 1, some things undeniably exist. Premise 2, my non-existence is possible. Premise 3, whatever has the possibility not to exist is currently caused to exist by another. And premise 4, there cannot be an infinite regress of current causes of existence. Since all causality of existence is current and simultaneous, it can be readily seen why an infinite regress is impossible. It is not necessarily contradictory to speak of an infinite regress of causes of becoming, because no cause is simultaneously existing and not existing. But a chain of causes, however short or long, wherein every cause is simultaneously both actual and potential with regard to existence, is clearly impossible. If there were a series of causes wherein each cause was both causing existence and having its existence caused at the same moment, then it would follow that they were both potential and actual simultaneously. Furthermore, at least one, if not all of the causes, would be an impossible self-caused being. For in every series where causality is occurring, at least one cause must be causing, and maybe all of them. But in an infinite series, every cause is being caused by another. If there were found one cause that was causing, but not being caused, it would be the uncaused cause which the infinite series seeks to avoid. Hence, the one, or more, cause that is doing the causing of every cause must be causing itself, since it too is being caused, as are all the other causes, by the causality in the series. But the only causality in the series is being given to the series by that cause itself. Hence that one cause would be causing itself. That is, it would be a self-caused being, which is impossible. Another way to put the impossibility of an infinite regress of current causes of contingent beings is to point out that either the series as a whole is a sufficient ground for all contingent beings, or it is not. If not, then there must be some being outside the series on which the series is grounded. In this case, a series would be dependent on a cause beyond it, and hence it would not avoid the theistic conclusion that there must be a cause beyond the alleged series. Either the causality which is admitted to be in the series comes from within the series, or it comes from beyond the series. If it comes from beyond the series, then the series is dependent on a cause which is independent of the series. If the causality is within the series, then there is simultaneous mutual self-causality going on. But adding up an infinite number of dependent beings within a series does not provide an adequate ground for them. If each being is a caused being, as they are admitted to be by the very nature of the series, then adding up all these effects does not provide a cause for these effects. No amount of effects equals a cause. If the parts are contingent, then the whole is contingent. Making the series longer or even infinitely long does not lessen the need for a grounding cause to explain it. Rather, it increases the need for a cause. If a chain with 5 links in it needs a peg to hang on, then a chain with an infinite number of links would need an even stronger peg outside itself to hang on. Therefore, an infinite regress of current causes of here and now existence is impossible. A point often overlooked in the question of an infinite regress is that there could not be an infinitely long series of causes of contingent beings because there could not even be a one-link chain between the cause of being and the being caused. The very first cause of contingent being could not itself be contingent. No contingent being can cause another being to exist. What does not account for its own existence could not possibly ground the existence of another. How can what is an effect with regard to its own existence be a cause with regard to another's existence? What is in a state of potentiality regarding existence for itself cannot simultaneously be in a state of actuality for the existence of another. The only possible ground for what can pass from potentiality to actuality with regard to being is what cannot pass from potentiality to actuality, i.e. a necessary being. Those things whose being is an effect cannot be the causes of being. What receives its existence from another cannot be the cause of another's existence. Only what is actual can actualize. What is in a state of potentiality can be actualized, but it cannot actualize. But every contingent being is in a state of potentiality regarding being. Therefore, no contingent being can cause being. Only a necessary being can cause the existence of a contingent being. Therefore, the very first being causing the existence of a contingent being must be a necessary being. And this leads to the first conclusion of the argument. Therefore, a first uncaused cause of my current existence exists. This conclusion follows logically and necessarily from the above premises. If I undeniably exist, and if my non-existence is possible, then I must have a cause that actualizes my existence. For I am not non-existent, but I could be. But the cause of all contingent existence, such as I am, cannot itself be contingent. If it were contingent, then it would not be the cause of the contingent. It, too, would be an effect. But it is the cause of the contingent, since the contingent undeniably needs a cause. Hence, the very first cause of my contingent existence is non-contingent. That is, it is a necessary being. There cannot be any chain of such causes, surely not an infinite chain. And the very first cause must be the necessary ground of all contingent existence. This first cause of all else that exists must itself be uncaused. It cannot be self-caused, which is impossible, and it cannot be caused by another because it is necessary, and the necessary being cannot be caused by another. Whatever is caused has the potentiality for existence, but a necessary being is pure actuality without any potentiality. Therefore, a necessary being cannot be caused. It is literally the not caused cause of all that is caused. It is the not affected effector of all effects. It is the necessary ground of all actualized possibility. There is, then, an uncaused cause of the existence of all that is caused to exist, of which I am one undeniable example. And this leads us to the next premise. This uncaused cause must be infinite, unchanging, all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-perfect. We have already seen that a necessary being must be a necessary, pure actuality, changeless, non-spatial, non-temporal, one, simple, infinite, and uncaused. It remains here to see whether it must be all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-perfect. By power, we mean what can effect a change in another, that is, what can cause something else to be or not be in some way. But this is precisely what the uncaused cause is, namely, that which is causing the very being of all that exists. Further, this uncaused cause is infinite in its being. Hence, it has non-limited causal power in its very being, which can effect anything that is possible to effect. Of course, it does not have power to do what is impossible. The impossible cannot be. This unlimited cause cannot not be, but it has the power to make come to be whatever can come to be. Further, this infinite cause of all that is must be all-knowing. It must be knowing because knowing beings exist. I am a knowing being, and I know it. I cannot meaningfully deny that I can know without engaging in an act of knowledge. Total agnosticism is impossible. But whatever I am, I have been caused to be. I cause my own becoming. This is what freedom is. But only the necessary being is the cause of my being. Hence, the actual ability to know, which I possess, is caused to be by the cause of all finite beings. But a cause can communicate to its effect only what it has to communicate. If the effect actually possesses some characteristic, then this characteristic is properly attributed to its cause. The cause cannot give what it does not have to give. If my mind or ability to know is received, then there must be mind or knower who gave it to me. The intellectual does not arise from the non-intellectual. Something cannot arise from nothing. The cause of knowing, however, is infinite. Therefore, it must know infinitely. It is also simple, eternal, and unchanging. Hence, whatever it knows, and it knows anything it is possible to know, it must know simply, eternally, and in an unchanging way. The only thing such a mind cannot know is what is impossible for it to know. For example, an infinite mind cannot know what it is like to be finite or changing in its knowledge or experience. Since there is no potentiality or finitude in this infinite cause, then the one way it cannot be like its effects is that it cannot be finite, potential, and so on. But since what it causes has both potentiality and actuality, the infinite cause is like the effect in its actuality, but not like the effect in its finitude. Therefore, whatever implies limitations in the world cannot be attributed to the cause of the world. Likewise, since the cause is pure actuality, whatever potentials it causes in other things must not be attributed to the cause which has no potentialities in its being. The cause is like the effect only in the actuality it communicates. For example, hot eggs are like the hot water in which they boil, but the hardness in the eggs caused by boiling is not in the water that causes it. The water, after all, is mobile or soft. Heat communicates heat, but the hot water does not communicate hardness to the egg. Hot water melts other things, for example, wax. The hardness or softness is due not to the actuality communicated by the cause, but to the condition or potentiality of the effect to receive causal efficacy. Likewise, not everything in the creature's knowledge can be attributed to the Creator. Some things are due to the finite and limiting potentials in which the causal power is received. It is for this reason that ignorance and other imperfections found in our knowledge cannot be attributed to the cause of the world. Only the actual perfections communicated to the effect by its cause can be properly attributed to the cause. Man knows finitely and imperfectly, but the cause of all knowledge knows infinitely and perfectly. There is a similarity in what is known, but a great difference in the way it is known. In brief, if we can know some things, the Creator can know all things. With us, some knowledge is possible. With Him, all knowledge is actual. Finally, for the same reason that the cause of knowing must be all-knowing, the cause of goodness must be all-good. Let us define good as that which is desired for its own sake. It is undeniable that some things are desired for their own sake. Persons are an end and not a means. They have intrinsic value and not merely extrinsic value. But what if an end with intrinsic value is desired for its own sake? There are two arguments that can be offered in support of this contention. First, persons do want to be desired for their own sake. Men do expect to be treated as ends, to be loved and not used. The proof of this is not how men act towards others, nor even the way they say men ought to act towards others. The proof is the way they expect others to act toward them. In order to discover if a man really believes it is good to be just, do not look at the way he acts toward others. Rather, look at the way he reacts when others do something to him. The quickest way to convince an antinomian student that he really believes in the principle of fairness is to give him an F on his brilliant term paper simply because you do not like the color of the folder in which it was enclosed. The most effective way to find out if a man believes it is wrong to break promises is to break a promise made to him. Now, if there is such a thing as good or that which is desired for its own sake, then it must be caused by the Creator of all that is. It must be remembered, should note in passing, that we are the cause of the becoming of good acts via our free choice, but the Creator is the cause of the being of all good. Second, that there are values or goods desired for their own sake seems undeniable, for even the person denying all goods is enjoying the good of being able to express that opinion. There is an implicit good of personhood and freedom manifest in the freedom to deny that there are any such intrinsic goods. How can a person deny his value as a person without evidencing his value as a person in the act of making the denial? But the cause of good must be good, since it cannot give what it does not have to give. All actualities actualized in the effect must pre-exist in the cause. But since the cause of all goodness is infinite, it follows that he must be infinitely good. For whatever the infinite cause has, he must be in the infinity of his being. Since he is simple and has no parts, he cannot be partly anything. Whatever he is entirely and completely. Therefore, the infinite and necessary cause of all good must be infinitely and necessarily good. The unchanging cause of all changing things must be unchangingly good. The cause of personhood cannot be less than personal himself. He may be much more than is meant by finite person, but he cannot be less. He may be superpersonal, but he is not subpersonal. Premise 7, this infinitely perfect being is appropriately called God. By God we mean what is worthy of worship, that is, what has ultimate worth-ship. Or in other words, God is the ultimate who is deserving of an ultimate commitment. God is that which has ultimate intrinsic value, what can be desired for his own sake as a person. Anything less than what is ultimately and intrinsically worthy of our admiration and submission is not really God, but a false God. An ultimate commitment to what is less than ultimate would be idolatry. It may be a religious commitment, but it is a commitment to an object that is less than religiously worthy or adequate. Now, if the foregoing arguments are sound, we have good reason to believe that an ultimate value worthy of our worship or ultimate commitment does indeed exist. For what is infinitely good and personal, and is the ground and creator of all finite goods and persons, is certainly worthy of worship. Nothing has more intrinsic value than the ultimate ground and source of all value. Hence, nothing is more worthy of worship than the infinitely perfect uncaused cause of all else that exists. Therefore, it is appropriate to call this infinitely perfect cause God. Therefore, God exists. We may conclude, then, that God exists. What in religion is known as the ultimate object of worship or commitment is by reason known to exist. Hence, what philosophy leads to, via the given argument, is not an abstract unmoved mover, but a real concrete ground for our being and personal object whom we can love with all our soul, strength, heart, and mind. The God the heart needs, the head has good reason to believe really exists. And this leads us to the next supplemental premise. This God who exists is identical to the God described in the Christian scriptures. We can look at certain passages where God is described as eternal, such as Colossians 1:16, Hebrews 1:2, changeless, Malachi 3:6, Hebrews 6:18, infinite, 1 Kings 8:27, Isaiah 66:1, all-loving, John 3:16, 1 John 4:16, and all-powerful, Hebrews 1:3, Matthew 19:26. But there cannot be two infinitely perfect, changeless, eternal beings. First, there can only be one infinite and necessary being, as has been shown. Second, there could not be two beings who have all possible perfections attributable to them. For in order to be two beings, one would have to differ from the other. Where there is no difference in being, there is only one being. But there can be no difference unless one being has something the other does not. But if there is something that an infinite being can have but one lacks, then the one lacking it is not absolutely perfect. Hence, there is only one absolutely perfect being. But if there cannot be two such beings, then the God described in the Bible is identical to the God concluded from the above argument. Therefore, final conclusion, the God described in the Scriptures exists. If there is only one God, and the God described in the Bible is identical in characteristics to him, then it follows logically that the God described in the Bible exists. For there cannot be two infinitely perfect beings, there cannot be two such ultimates or absolutes, and so forth. Hence, the God portrayed in Scripture does indeed exist. This does not mean that everything the Bible claims that this God said or did, he actually said or did. Whether or not what the Bible says about this God is true is another question. What we may conclude here is two things. First, the God described in the Bible does exist. And second, whatever the Bible claims for this God that is not inconsistent with his nature, it is possible that he did indeed do or say.